Ladies and gentlemen, I suppose nearly every one of us has some particular peculiarity, some phobia, like spiders or being afraid of the dark, or something like that. Well, my particular phobia is believing that every object that I see, both animate and inanimate, has a distinct personality of its own. I'm perfectly sure that everything around me thinks and talks and feels just like any human being. Don't you think so? Well, listen. When any one of you has been ill, and you're lying in bed for days and days, you look around your bedroom, and you notice all kinds of objects that you've probably lived with all your life, but just because you're sick, they all seem to assume terrifying and sometimes jeering shapes. There's that picture over there, for instance, between the window and the bathroom door, which isn't quite straight. And the bathroom door itself, it's shut, but it's too shut. It's forbiddingly, arrogantly shut, with a look like Nurse had when she said, "No, you've had enough candy for today." The chairs, the curtains, everything in the room takes upon itself a perfectly maddening aspect. Even the flowered border around the top of your wallpaper has a continuous pattern whose shape sounds like this. All round the wall. And then suddenly you notice a bit that goes, and you don't know why. Now, I've gone into the study of this thing pretty thoroughly, and I'm convinced that all these inanimate objects are, in reality, alive. And among the most alive objects I've seen, perhaps the most startling is the railway engine. A railway engine is a vindictive, aggressive, livid beast. And yet what amazes me is that the engineer who drives it isn't in the least afraid of it. On the contrary, when he gets the signal to go, with the greatest possible unconcern, he catches hold of a handle, pulls it down, and this livid beast is unleashed, like this. And so forth on its journey. And this huge monster is, very foolishly, I think, allowed to careen madly on its way. Well, now having unleashed the train, we find it has a colossal argument with the tracks it's running on, like this. Biddle-a-daw, giddle-a-daw, biddle-a-dee, giddle-a-daw, biddle-a-daw, skiddle-a-dee, biddle-a-dee, biddle-a-daw, giddle-a-daw, biddle-a-dee, biddle-a-daw. But that goes on the entire journey. And not only does it have a colossal argument with the tracks it's running on, but also all the other tracks when they dare to cross its own, like this. Biddle-a-daw, giddle-a-daw, biddle-a-dee, giddle-a-daw, now, it's a pretty appalling thought that this sort of thing is taking place all the time, all over the world. Mind you, in some countries, the language is different, so it goes, but it's all very much the same thing. I remember the first time I went to France, I took a train from Calais to Paris. I was crossing the tracks at the station at Calais to get to the platform from which my train left, and on my way I had to pass in front of a huge French engine. It really was an enormous beast. And what is more, it had 9 more of everything that any other self-respecting engine would have. Cow catchers, bells, steel derby hats, knives and forks. In fact, everything hanging all over it. Well, I cowered away in horror from this terrifying creature, but suddenly, to my amazement, it let out an incredibly effeminate voice. It seemed to me to be so unquestionably masculine, and yet as it started on its journey, all it managed to summon up was... Of course, I may be wrong about that, but it did seem to me to be a trifle peculiar. But let's get back on the train again. After the engine has been unleashed and the trip is well on its way, you'll find that from time to time the train meets up with some quite inoffensive little bridge spanning the railway. But the engine cannot tolerate anything within its reach, so it spits at it as it tears underneath, like this. Then after a time, you come to the outskirts of a large city. And if you look out of the window, you'll notice some things called sidings. Now, the whole subject of sidings is simply fraught with interest, if only because the public is completely in the dark as to what they're really for. But I know, don't I? The question of sidings amounts simply to this. There comes a time in the life of every engine, you see, when it ceases to be virile and hearty, ceases to be a glamour boy, that is, and just lapses into a tiresome bronchial senility. It's for these old boys that the railway company has most magnanimously provided said sidings as a kind of haven of rest, a club or a recreation ground for them. Here they are left in peace to themselves and given a lot of freight cars to play with. You can see them at play any day in the week, and what a lovely game it is. It's called shuttling. First, one old engine comes puffing along like this and smacks his chest into a long line of freight cars. Bing, bang, bang, bing, bong, bang, ding, bong, ding, bing, bong, bing, bing. And immediately another old gent does the same thing at the other end and smacks them all back again. Blah, bong, bang, bong, bang, bing, bang, ding, bong, ding, ba, bang, ding, bong, ding. And in this way, the railway company is carried on. Incidentally, these old engines carry a deep resentment for the modern, streamlined monsters that you and I ride in, and you can hear them hiss at you as you go by, like this. Perhaps you'll never believe me when I tell you that I once took a ride in the engineer's cab of one of these beasts. As we went along, I happened to glance over the side and saw what I later learned was a piston rod, a most peculiar-looking thing, which kept going tirelessly back and forth, at the same time making a noise something like this. But there was another piece of machinery nearby which really fascinated me. This little fellow bobbed up and down gaily like a sort of Jiminy Cricket of the whole works. And although he was really awfully near the piston rod, he never collided with it. So the effect was as follows. Schenectady, 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 Schenectady. Now, there's one thing I must know before I die, and that's something that takes place in the tunnel leading into Grand Central Station in New York. As the train enters the tunnel, it slackens its speed a bit until it's going fairly slowly, and then you'll notice all down the side of the tunnel, at intervals, are a lot of flare torches. And in between these torches are men standing. They're leaning on picks and shovels and golf clubs and billiard cues, in fact, anything they can lay their hands on. And they never seem to move. In fact, I think they live there. And as you go through the tunnel, an extraordinary noise starts at the far end, comes nearer and nearer, and finally crashes past the window. I've no idea what it is, but it goes like this. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, darling, darling, darling. Bum. I think it must be a piece of tin which has been nailed to the side of the tunnel with some signal number or something painted on it, and it sticks out, and it's too big. And it strikes the side of the train as it goes through the tunnel. And presumably the men are merely there to bend the tin back, ready for the next train to hit it when it goes through the tunnel. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I feel I cannot leave you without informing you of the one thing that a train loathes more than anything else in the world, and that is another train coming in the opposite direction. That it simply cannot take. When you're on a trip, you've probably settled down quite comfortably to your book or magazine, having got used to diddle-a-dum, diddle-a-da, fiddle-a-dee, diddle-a-dee, and all the other maddening noises, when suddenly, to your horror, this new thing bursts upon you and nearly knocks you on the compartment floor, and it goes like this. Diddle-a-da, diddle-a-da, diddle-a-dee, diddle-a-da, 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 hallala, 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 diddle-a-da, diddle-a-dee, diddle-a-da, diddle-a-da. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I must go home now and try on that new jacket. All right, nurse. I'm ready. Goodbye now.